Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NFL tight end picks for week 9. There are 4 guys that we're really looking at. It's a pretty strange week for the tight ends. Looking through it, a lot of the guys up towards the top end have some pretty tough matchups. Obviously, Rob Gronkowski is going to be on this list because at this point he is pretty much proven to us that he's matchup proof and somebody that we have to consider every week. But after that, you'll notice a lot of the other tight ends I had selected here are lower price tight ends. Lower price tight ends have been the way to go all season long. Last week, you had guys like Watson and Tammy, even a guy like Crockett Gilmore who caught a touchdown pass. These guys are cheap. They allow you a lot of roster flexibility. Excuse me. And they've been paying off a lot more often than some of the guys who are priced $1,500 to $2,000 higher than them. The guys in that range like Eifert and Kelsey and, some of the other guys that we have up there, Jason Witten. These guys that I'm talking about are guys who are still able to get you 15 to 20 points. Some of them have the upside like Watson did last week of, 30 points over there, or Tammy did with his 30-point game as well. You can get those kind of scores for much cheaper. You don't have to go up and spend, and that gives you an extra $2,000 to use in other points in your roster. $2,000 might not seem like a ton of money, but it's the difference between, taking a top-end wide receiver or a top-end running back and having to come down to that, $5,000 or $6,000 range where the guy has much less safety and probably a lot less upside. So if you can come down and get one of these cheap tight ends in the 4,000 or less range, you're really giving yourself a good chance. Plus, if they get you like 15 points, that's basically 4 points per $1,000 of cost on some of these guys. And that's how you wind up putting together these rosters with some really high scores. If you go back and look over the last couple of weeks at some of the winning rosters, other than Rob Gronkowski, you're not going to see too many names of guys that cost more than, maybe $4,200 or $4,400. Guys like Jordan Reed, guys like Watson, Ladarius Green, you were able to have all these guys for pretty cheap. They put up anywhere between 14 and 35 points for you and, still gave you leftover money to spend on the rest of your roster. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the guys who we think could be good options this week to help you get to the top of the Millie Maker or whatever other tournaments that you happen to be playing in. Okay, these are the 4 guys on our top tight end targets for week 9. We got Rob Gronkowski at $8,000, Charles Clay and Delaney Walker at $4,200 each, and then Benjamin Watson right at that $4,000 range. Oh, hold on one second. Let me get back to Gronk over there for you. Now, the first guy we're going to talk about is Rob Gronkowski. As you guys know, he has the highest floor and the highest ceiling at the position. Basically, there's no other tight end who's safer with their points or a guy that can get you the 3 touchdowns or the 100-yard 10-catch game like Rob Gronkowski was able to pull off last week. He's basically the only tight end that's worth paying up for this week. He does have a matchup that doesn't look great on paper. They don't give up a ton of fantasy points to the tight end position. But again, we've already seen him go up against the Jets, who were the best against the tight end at the time. We've seen him go up against the Buffalo Bills, who were the best against the tight end all last season and were pretty good early this season before they met up with Gronk. This is a guy who is matchup proof. You can play him against anybody. It doesn't matter if it's the best matchup or the worst matchup. New England's a team that likes to throw the ball. Gronk's a guy who makes a lot of catches, sees a decent amount of usage in that offense. The biggest drawback you have with him is you don't get huge value by using Rob Gronkowski. $8,000 is very expensive. Even if he does have a 100-yard game and winds up with a touchdown, he still might only get to about 24, 25 points, which would basically be about 3 points per $1,000 of cost. As we said before, he's a safe play that you can use in your cash games. He's somebody that makes sense over there. But if you really want upside, if you're really looking to win a tournament, it's probably best not to spend up on tight end and try to find somebody in that cheaper $3,000 to $4,000 range that can give you a really, really big upside. And here are a couple of the guys who we think might be able to do that. The first one we're going to talk about is Charles Clay. Now, Tyrod's back this week, and Tyrod loves throwing to Charles Clay. We've already seen 2 games this year in the last 3 where Clay saw 13 targets with Tyrod as the quarterback. And a lot of the reason for that has to do with Watkins and Harvin being out, which they're both likely to be out this weekend as well. Clay is also somebody who makes for a good red zone target. And again, if he's going to see 13 targets, if he makes 8 catches for, basically 50, 60 yards, which, to be perfectly honest with you, is not even asking a lot for him. You're probably more like 8 for 80 based on some of the averages he has. That would give him 16 fantasy points, and 16 fantasy points would be 4 points per $1,000 of cost based off his price. Another guy who's in a similar situation is Delanie Walker. The Titans should be trailing in this game and throwing late, and it is a high-scoring game with a high total. He's seen 8 or more targets per game since returning from the injury in Week 1, where he saw 3 targets, caught a touchdown pass, and then was knocked out for that game and had to sit out the next game. Wide receivers Kendall Wright and Harry Douglas are both questionable for Tennessee in this one. And the New Orleans pass defense he goes up against was just shredded by the Giants last week. If you don't have Kendall Wright and Harry Douglas, that's a lot of targets that are going to be opening up. And I don't think they're all going to go Dorial Green Beckham's way. I think you're going to see a lot of Delanie Walker. I think you're going to see him picking up a lot of the slack there in that situation. And again, if they're going to be trailing and throwing late, they're going to need somebody reliable to go to. And both of these young quarterbacks look at him as a reliable target that they can throw to when they get in trouble. The last guy I want to talk about is Benjamin Watson. He's averaging 19.5 fantasy points over the last 4 games. His targets during that stretch have doubled from approximately 4 per game to approximately 8 per game over that time frame. New Orleans is a team that plays better at home, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Drew Brees throws for huge yardage whenever they have home games. In Ben Watson's last 4 games, if you take the average points that he scored divided by his price today, you're going to get close to 5 fantasy points per $1,000 of cost. You get $50,000 to spend. If you get 5 points per $1,000 of cost, you're going to wind up with a score of 250, which puts you on Millie Maker winning pace. So if you want to be a millionaire, Ben Watson is a guy who lately has been giving you the average fantasy points you would need in order to get that done. So those are 4 tight ends that we're looking at for this weekend. As I said, there's some really bad, really tough matchups that we have in that middle range for a lot of the guys who are at tight end this week. You're not going to get a lot of value out of using the Eiferts, the Kelseys this week. It's not a good situation for them. They have tough matchups. Their price is too high to pay off their average salary without going for, 12 or 15 catches or, having a 10-catch, 100-yard, 2-touchdown performance. I mean, think about it. Gronk is basically the only tight end who has come up with games that huge this year. He had a 3-touchdown performance earlier in the year. Last year, he had 10 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. I'm sorry, last week he had 10 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown. If you don't get a huge game like that out of your tight end, you're going to have no chance of paying off some of these salaries that are above $5,000 or $6,000. You're better off looking down in the low range, trying to figure out which of those, guys that are underpriced and being overlooked are worth using and rolling with them, because lately that's been the way to go. Whether it's been getting 18 to 20 points out of a Ladarius Green or getting 30 points out of a Jacob Tamme or a Benjamin Watson, the low-price tight ends have been the ones that have been paying off and seen most often on top rosters. So you can try to fight the trend if you want. As for me, I'm going to try to figure out which of these cheap guys I can put in my roster, use the money that's left over to spend up and get some studs at wide receiver, running back, and quarterback, and hopefully see my name at the top of the Millie Maker next week. So thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.